Good morning, everyone. This is one more Athena talk, and we are very happy that this talk is delivered by one of our member institution, the University of Maribor. It's a great pleasure to have with us Professor Zoran Ren, who is going to present us a supercomputer facility that they run and they have developed as a national facility in Maribor in Slovenia. The title of his talk is like HPC RIVR project, and they would like to share with us their experience on how to set up such a big national project. More about the details of the system. Of course, I will provide the floor to Professor Ren to give us more details. I would like to present the speaker very shortly. So Professor Zoran Ren is a professor of mechanical engineering at the University of Maribor in the Faculty of Mechanical Engineering. In 1987, he received his Bachelor of Mechanical Engineering from the University of Maribor. Continuously, he received his Master from the same institution in 1990s. He continued his studies in UK, where he was awarded PhD from the University of Swansea in Wales in computational engineering. His work has received more than 3,500 citations. His age index is 34, and we are looking forward, for this talk in the Great Friday, I will say. It's quite challenging, but Zoran, once again, on behalf of the Athena, thank you very much for your contribution, and we are looking forward for your talk. You can share your screen whenever you want, and we are looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Kostas. Let me just share the screen with you. I'm sorry. I hope you see the screen.
Yeah, very quiet, very clear. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for the nice introduction. Okay. So in the next half an hour, I will tell you a story which actually began many years ago. When I was 27, I had an opportunity to work at the University of Swansea in UK as a young researcher on a big research project. And at that time, I was tasked to build the first academic supercomputer at that university. I was given a box of 48 transputers and the soldering iron, and I had to first solder the transputers together, and then in the next half year code the system for the transputers, and in the next 3 months to build a code that was able to simulate the explosion effect on the surface mining for some kind of industrial project. So that was my first introduction to a kind of supercomputing or parallel computing, which followed me throughout the years. And strange as it is, 30 years later, I was tasked to lead a project to build a national supercomputer center of Slovenia, first of this kind in our country. So the HPC RIVR is an acronym of the project which stands for the High Performance Computing Research Infrastructure Eastern Region. The circumstances that led to building a first national supercomputer center in Slovenia are, of course, various. Now, in the past, we had some experiences with some supercomputer centers or supercomputer systems that were installed in some of institutions, but the government never provided enough funding to continue their operation. So they were like bright sparks, in our history, which never lasted long. Luckily, in March 2017, our Ministry for Science and Education published a call to all researchers of Slovenia to express an interest in necessary large research infrastructure. And the primary infrastructure that was required by many researchers was, of course, supercomputing facilities. So then in July 2017, Slovenia joined EuroHPC Joint Undertaking initiative, which was established a year before with the aim to build a European supercomputer network. In January 2018, we have established a Slovenian national supercomputer network, which brought together all interested parties or shareholder from the private sector and from the public sector that had any kind of interest in the supercomputing. And that was necessary because we needed to combine all our understanding, knowledge, and experiences in this field to build a national supercomputer center. In the same year, then SLING also joined partnership for advanced computing in Europe, which was the, let's say, the origin of supercomputing before the EuroHPC joint undertaking. And in 2018, the government allocated national and cohesion funds in Eastern Slovenia region for HPC RIVR project. Luckily, my group was operating a mini supercomputer at that time, and we were the only group that actually in the eastern region, which is kind of less developed region, operated this supercomputer and had any experience. So I was directly approached by the ministry and asked to lead the project. So the project goals were initially to upgrade the existing national HPC capability, because at that time, the complete national computing power was below 200 teraflops. So nothing really important. We were never listed on any, let's say, international list for supercomputing power. And these systems were dispersed between different institutions and, of course, not really systematically funded. So this was a big change, to go to a national supercomputing center. We were also tasked to build the infrastructure for open research data and to set up a digital repository for Slovenian research and innovation community. Of course, because the HPC knowledge was limited at that time, very concentrated in some research groups, our task was also to, let's say, widespread this knowledge, to build an HPC network of partners, and to build the manpower of the professionals that would be able to operate such systems. Of course, such an infrastructure would enable us much better participation in international projects, and we also were aiming to become members of several international associations, which we luckily through the project achieved. Some project actually started at December 2018 when we signed the contract with the ministry. Of course, the negotiations were more than 6 months. Then the project was actually prepared in a rush. And then the contract was signed. And immediately we started to realize the project, and the project was structured in a way that we wanted first to build a prototype supercomputer, a small scale at the University of Maribor, which would be used as a test bed to test different components. And then when we learn more about these new components, we would be building a production primary supercomputer in a national supercomputer center. So this was like initial goal. And in just 6 months, we have built the HPC Meister, which entered the production phase in November 2019. And this HPC was built from the off-the-shelf component following our own architecture. So we designed the architecture, we bought the components, and then we assembled them and set up, of course, the open source code system with the aim that this system would be, let's say, adaptable, that we could change the configuration, we could test different procedures, and we could learn more how to build the large supercomputer. At that time, it was planned that the project would be concluded in September 2020. But COVID struck, and also our project got visible on the European level, and we were invited to compete for the additional European funds from the EuroHPC joint undertaking to build one of the first 5 petascale supercomputers in Europe. So we applied for this call, we got selected, and we got additional 5.9 million euro. The initial funding was 20 million euro for the HPC RIVR project. So this is like national and European funds, and plus 5.9 billion euro. When we secured additional money from EuroHPC joint undertaking, of course, the story slightly changed. There was, at the beginning, there was a opinion that 20 million euro, it's not a lot of money to build a true supercomputer. So we wanted to do it the same way like we built the HPC Meister. So by our own architecture, by involving a lot of our own work to set up the system and also to operate the system. And with that, we could achieve the project goal at that time, which was that we should build a system that would have at least 1.5 petaflop capability. With securing additional 6 million euro, of course, we could set our sights a little bit higher. And at that time, we decided that actually we will purchase a system following the complete solution from different vendors. So we will not build a system by our architecture. We will set up, of course, the design goals, but we will leave to different vendors to satisfy our needs. And through that, of course, the primary system about which I will talk a little bit later was actually built, set up, and it was put into the operation in March 2021. Of course, throughout that time, we were faced with challenges put forward by the COVID, to which we had to adapt our operations. Also, the selected supplier of the production supercomputer also needed to adapt its operations. So it was quite a challenging situation, but luckily we came through as winners, I can say now, or we were lucky in a sense that we were able to organize things that at the end we had the operational system, which was delayed only 6 months due to the COVID. The project was run by the project consortium. The leading partner was University of Maribor, which had some HPC experience, knowledge, and research. Then the important partner was Institute of Information Sciences in Maribor, which had the infrastructure into which we could set up the computer, the supercomputer, and they would provide the supercomputer infrastructural support. And the third partner was the Faculty of Information Studies from Novo Mesto, which had some knowledge and understanding of the supercomputing at that time, but which was also selected to serve as the, let's say, faraway partner that would be used for testing the setup supercomputer systems. The network of HPC partners actually involved all public institutions in Slovenia that had any interest or experience in supercomputing. So there are different faculties, different universities, and we set up an agreement with them to, let's say, help build the system. I have mentioned before that we have also established a Slovenian National Supercomputer Network because we wanted to bring together all shareholders in Slovenia that have any kind of interest in supercomputing, either private or the public. This actually was a winning card for us because this project was involving all experts that we had in our country and also some international professionals, experts that basically help to build the system, help to define the requirements for the production HPC system, and were all the time involved in the project execution. It was a lot of communication, but at the end, it really paid off. So with the SLING, the consortium signed the collaboration agreement already in June 2018, which means before the start of the project, where the SLING actually took over the education exchange and knowledge transfer, technical consulting on HPC software and hardware, integration of HPC RIVR systems into national HPC infrastructure, and they were collaborating in defining the rules for access and use of HPC RIVR systems. So we kind of shared the workload that was necessary to not just build the supercomputing systems, but also to put them into the operation and also incorporate the supercomputing facility into the research activities of scientists in Slovenia. Of course, at the beginning, we were faced with very different requirements from the scientific community in Slovenia. So these are kind of an overview of the fields that our researchers are working on, and they need the supercomputing facilities for that. So at the very beginning, it was decided that we will not be building a purpose supercomputer, but a hybrid multi-purpose supercomputer, which means that we would provide a partition for the CPU computing, so intensive computing, and we will also provide a partition for the logical operations, so which is based on the GPU accelerated computing nodes, but more about that a little bit later. So we wanted to satisfy all the requirements of our scientific community, which results now show that we were also quite successful in that sense. So, as I was saying, we were actually building 3 systems. The first one, built in a rush, was a prototype supercomputer Meister at the University of Maribor with maximum computing power, Rmax of 244 teraflops. With this system, we already doubled the computing power of our country, Slovenia. If you remember, before that project, we had the combined computing power of less than 200 teraflops. So this was, at the beginning, the strongest supercomputer, which was, of course, heavily used for testing of different components. The components that we have used were very new at the market at that time. We were perhaps one of the first in the world that built a supercomputer using the new AMD computing nodes with ROM chips, because we found out that they are very energy efficient, and this actually showed up in our initial testing. So the energy consumption was very low comparing to the computing nodes from the other vendors. So that was kind of a good decision, although it was a risky one, because it was at that time not yet clear how well will the libraries, the coding libraries on AMD computers basically operate. But through time, this was, of course, improved, and now we can see that many systems in the world are basically built on the same AMD ROM chips and the computing nodes from AMD. In 2020, we built a very small remote access systems at Faculty of Information Sciences in Novo Mesto, which is about 140 kilometers away from Maribor. And that system was used to test the remote access to the supercomputers in Maribor. So in parallel to building a supercomputing system, we have also upgraded our national backbone for the internet communication. So these speeds were improved up to several hundreds of gigabits per second. Also, our, let's say, national connection to the international network was upgraded to almost 2 terabits per second. So we were testing how fast our connections are to efficiently use the supercomputers, not only as batch operated jobs, but also throughout the certain requirements to be used interactively. And in 2021, we built the primary production supercomputer VEGA with maximum computing power of 6.9 petaflops. So we basically built a system that was 4 times stronger comparing to the initial requirement in 2018. In the following, I will talk a little bit more about the supercomputer VEGA, because this is our primary production supercomputer. It was actually the first operational EuroHPC joint undertaking supercomputer in Europe, of which we are very proud of. And it is in production since April 2021. So VEGA design goals were to build a general purpose supercomputer that we would have two partitions, CPU intensive and GPU accelerated partition. So one is computing, the other one is logical, that we would allow for extreme data processing that would be able to support artificial intelligence and machine learning. So the compute nodes should have the WAN connectivity. The connectivity should be based on the hyper-converged network, that we would be having a system for remote access for job submission, and that the system should in generally provide for good scalability for massively parallel jobs. Also, we, as I was explaining at the beginning, had to build a digital repository for Slovenian research and innovation system. So there was a requirement to have a high sequential and random storage access and permanent storage, fast and permanent storage of the larger capacity. So these were kind of design goals that led then to specifications and negotiations with possible vendors to satisfy our needs. So multi-purpose architecture was built in extreme fast data exchange and artificial intelligence. The hardware partition, as I was explaining, was the compute and GPU and HPC, so the systems for the login, for the operations, for the management. The interconnect network was built on the InfiniBand and the fast internet. So we have both systems interconnected, built in parallel, because sometimes we are using one or the other, depending on the jobs that we have to operate. Also, we have a very high CPU density. So we have the most dense computing nodes that are possible in the world at that time. The, let's say, necessary power to run the system at the full capacity, it's about 1 megawatt. And the energy efficiency is 1.15, which is one of the most efficient supercomputer systems in the world. And all this is concentrated mostly on a very small area, which of course was quite limiting for the vendors that wanted to build different architectures with different systems, which require more space. We were limited with the available computing spaces at the Institute of Information Sciences. So this was a kind of the limiting factor, which at the end, when we negotiated with the vendors, left just one vendor that was able to satisfy our need. And he was also successful on the international tender. So that company was Atos, European company. So European Commission was very happy that Atos was able to satisfy our needs. And here are just some details about the system. It is important that we have the separate performances for the CPU and GPU partition. So CPU partition enables the 3.8 petaflops. So that means floating point operations per second. And peta is 10 on the power of 15. And the GPU accelerated, they allow for the 3.1 petaflops. So combined computing power is 6.9. Also, we have a long-term storage of usable capacity of 18 petabytes, which would be good for a couple of years. As we know that the production of digital data increases, it's quadruples almost every year. So this 18 petabytes would be used in a very short time. We should be thinking already of providing bigger capacity for the storage. Also, the computing nodes in the system are in slim and fat configuration. So some jobs require very little random access memory, and some jobs that are heavily dependent on a single CPU processing basically require quite a lot of the random access memory. So we have, of course, taken care of this with two different configurations. And also the high performance storage has a usable capacity of 1 petabyte, which means high performance, that this is a very fast storage, you know, so this is outside system run by Lustre, but it is extremely fast with throughput of above 400 gigabytes per second. The latest world ranking of the system is 140 for CPU partition and 196 for the GPU partition. Why this is different? Because there are different benchmarks that you run on a CPU and a GPU partition, and of course you cannot run the combined 2 partitions together. So that's why this is kind of separated. But if we combine this computing power, then we are ranked at about place 84 in the world. When the Vega was put into the operation in April 2021, the system was ranked 44 in the world. And at that time, Slovenia was at the 12th place on the computing power in the world. Now, in November 2020, when many new HPC systems will be built throughout the world, we are kind of occupying a place 26, which is quite good if you look at the countries that are before us. So we are very happy about that. But of course, this is the current situation, and already we are planning to build the new system, because I should stress that the operational time frame of a supercomputer system nowadays it's 5 years. And after 5 years, because of the fast development of the components, you know, requirements to use less and less power to be very energy efficient, is simply too expensive to run, and it's cheaper to build a new system that, of course, uses less power. So Vega funding, it's shown here. So initially we had 20 million to run the project, to, let's say, set up the system. So out of the 20 million, 17.4 million was used for the, let's say, hardware. And the rest of the money was used to educate people, to employ the system engineers, to support research activities, to kick off at the beginning the research use of the system. Then EuroHPC contributed a little bit less than 6 million, and the Ministry of Education, Science and Sport, which has now changed the name slightly, actually supports the running of the system, and the estimated operational cost of the system is 4 million in 5 years. So this is the amount of money that we are investing into the supercomputing facility. So I was mentioning before that we are very proud to be the first supercomputer system in the EuroHPC joint undertaking initiative. We were lucky that Atos decided to set up the operations in Maribor, because they knew that because of the COVID, the transportation times are longer, that it would be quite difficult to do the acceptance test first at their headquarters in France, and then again set up the computer in Maribor and do the final acceptance test. So we decided that we will do everything in Maribor. So all the components that were required but basically shipped to Maribor. Atos also rented a large hall in Maribor where they were basically doing the storage, all the operations that would usually they do in headquarters. So the system was actually built on the premises of Izum and successfully tested before put into the operation. All this contributed to that we were able to first put the system into the operation. Then in July, June and July, the other PETA scale systems followed, because in the initial call, the EuroHPC joint undertaking funded 5 PETA scale systems and 3 pre-exascale systems. All these systems are now running and are in the operation, and they are being used to test different configurations, different components, different systems, intercommunication, which will all serve to generate the experience, knowledge, and understanding to start building the first exascale system in Europe. United States and Japan already have the exascale systems, probably China too, but China is not saying much about it. Europe does not have the exascale system. Exascale system means that these systems are providing more than 10 to power of 18 floating point of operations per second. Hopefully, we will have the exascale system in 2024 or 2025. We will see. There is also an idea to basically build a very fast communication network using the new technologies and to combine the widespread supercomputers into the European exascale system, which would be one of the first in the world. We will see what will happen. So basically, because the HPC VEGA was differently funded, we have shares. We are sharing the capabilities of the system. So 65% of all capabilities are national, so used by the Slovenian researchers. Up to 70% are being offered for the open access, up to 20% is available for commercial access, and 10% is always reserved for the hosting entity reservation to run the necessary, let's say, support activities. 35% of all capacity of the supercomputers are used by EuroHPC joint undertaking. So SLING and EuroHPC every year publish several calls for access to the national supercomputer systems. And any researcher, public or private, can basically apply and can secure the capabilities of the supercomputer systems for their purposes. So here are the number of the projects and registered users in the year 2022 that were basically using the supercomputer VEGA. So you see that the number of the projects and the number of the users increases all the time. The usage of the system is somewhere around 90%, which means that we have very good, let's say, efficiency of the system to support the activities. Of course, there are very many fields that use the supercomputers. One of these fields that use the large-scale computations is earth scientists to, let's say, predict the weather, to predict the earthquake, to predict the behavior of the volcanoes, to predict the ocean streams, forest fires. You know, these are really large-scale computations that are impossible to do on a single computer. You need a supercomputer for something like that. Then, of course, high-energy physics, space exploration, which is now heavily supported by this supercomputing. We are very actively involved in the project Atlas, and most of our supercomputing capabilities are being used to support the project Atlas. You know that in the collider, they make the experimental test. They record a huge amount of data, which is then reverse engineered to basically find out what is happening at the center of the collision. So because we have all the sensor data around the collision area, and from this sensor data, we are trying to reproduce what is happening at the collision. Also, of course, what is happening at the different faraway stars, planets, following the observations by our space exploration capsules, with the telescopes, you know, with different imaging. You know, we are trying to computationally reproduce the mechanisms that are driving some changes at these faraway planets. Then, of course, medicine, health, chemistry, and molecular simulation, very important. We would never come to the COVID vaccine so fast if it was not for this supercomputing. Vega and Meister from the very early days contributed in the open research projects run by the Stanford University, where they were actually computing the side effects of the new proteins that were developing as a drug or a vaccine for the people, because it is quite easy to develop a drug, but it is quite difficult to prove all the side effects of that drug on human being. And this can be done quite efficiently by the supercomputers. Then, of course, mechanical engineering, computational fluid dynamics engineers, we always need such a kind of machines to simulate our processes. Let it be for the aerodynamics of a car, for the sloshing of the fuel or the sloshing in the reservoir, or the efficiency of the jet engine or the crash tests. All this is possible nowadays with use of the supercomputer. So we have much better predicting capabilities in the virtual world that we are, of course, efficiently using to optimize the next generation of the products. And of course, what is very important is the machine and deep learning for various purposes. So autonomous driving, speech and face recognition, language analytics. We see many great advances in the recent time. One of the most impressive is the ChatGPT, which is the first, let's say, almost real-time through artificial intelligence, which is based only on the written text. Amazing. But anyway, we are doing a lot of research in image recognition, image analysis for the autonomous driving, which is very, very impressive. The supercomputing systems are accessible under the European Charter for Access to Research Infrastructure, which drives the open access. The access is clearly defined and documented, and we try to make it as simple as possible. And the supercomputer systems, let it be our national or international, are usually accessible under two modes. The first one is excellence-driven access, which is for supporting the public research. And the other one is the market-driven access, which is set up to support the commercial research. So the difference between these two access modes is in the protection of the data. So market-driven access is usually competitive. There are usually some trade secrets, and of course the systems should provide the maximum security of the data that is being exchanged, that is visible only to the company that does these simulations. In excellence-driven access, usually the regulations for the protection of the data are not so strict. And of course, with this open access, we use different authentication steps so that we identify the person, that this is really a person or a group or the institution that exists. So it is not like some ghosting institution, and also to check the access credentials. These credentials are then awarded to the interested parties, and then they can allocate different resources. So these projects can be just kind of like a prototype project that I would like to test something in a couple of days, or they can be short-term research projects that are lasting 3 to 6 months, or a large-scale projects that can last for a year or several years. And according to the importance of the project, each of such an application is evaluated, and the proper resources in terms of the processing power and storage power are being then awarded to the interesting parties. Of course, as long as these systems are completely supported financially by the public money, in our case, our government, the use of the systems for the supporting public research is for free. So in Slovenia, the government fully pays the operation of the system. So Slovenian researchers have a free access to the supercomputing systems. It is slightly different in the EuroHPC joint undertaking, but the use of these systems is heavily subsidized. So it's quite cheap to access these systems nowadays if you are a public researcher. Of course, if you would like to have a commercial access, then you pay all the costs, which again are not too high. And with that, I have reached the end of my story. I hope I was able to tell you something interesting, something that you might not have yet known. From my perspective, I can only say that, of course, the supercomputing have changed a lot from my early times. I was able to be one of the kind of pioneers, I would say, you know, that everything was done by hand, by yourself, all the putting the hardware together, all the coding together. Nowadays, this is, of course, impossible. All these systems are very professional, very optimized. They involve the work of many engineers, you know, many different professions to be able for them to operate at such a high level of the efficiency. Perhaps I should also mention that the VEGA was the second system in the world that uses the hot water as a cooling element. And this is the trick to achieve very high energy efficiency of 1.15. With that, I would like to end my talk, and I'm, of course, available for your questions.
Thank you very much, Zoran, for this very nice and inspirational talk. You answered one of my questions at the last moment. How do you manage the cooling? But I can continue with another question regarding this. Probably you can stop sharing the screen. Excellent.
I did. Okay.
Yeah, that's work. I have a couple of questions. I would like to ask, but I would like to ask the audience if they have some questions before I will start. So let me start. Even though that some of my questions, because I don't know anything from supercomputers or computers in general, since my background is quite different. So the first question, which is fundamental, I would like to ask you, what is teraflop? I don't know, what is teraflop?
Okay. The speed of the computer is measured in the number of the floating point operations per second. So that would be like if you just simply one mathematical function. So 1 + 1 is 2. So tera is 10 to the power of 15. So it's 10 to the power of 15 such operations per second.
Excellent.
Then the supercomputer can do for you.
So it's like the speed, how fast they can operate, how fast they can make calculations.
Let's say just to be like in the very easy terms, like
for me,
supercomputer VEGA, it's as fast as about 50,000 desktop computers of the high end.
Okay.
So this is the comparison of the speeds and the capabilities.
All right, this was my first question. My second question, of course, you have mentioned, it was like, how do you handle the thermal loads? Like, how do you handle, the temperature, for the whole system? But you mentioned that you are using water for the cooling. So in some cases, they are using geothermy. So how more efficient is the geothermy than the water cooling?
Well, there are two different thermal exchanges because you can use for the heat exchanger the air that you are cooling with the geothermal water. Okay, this is what is usually done. So supercomputers are usually cooled by air. Some are cooled by water, or some are cooled by other media, which is a fluid. It depends. So you extract the heat from the CPUs, and then you, of course, should transfer this heat to the outside system. So for that, you need the heat exchangers.
Yeah, but what is the most efficient way? Because there is
the most efficient way is with hot water.
Hot water, yes.
Because the modern CPUs, they have quite high limit thermal load even 80-90 degrees. Okay, so they operate well at these temperatures already. So you can use quite hot water. Let's say in our system, the water that enters the system is at the temperatures of 34 degrees, and it exits the systems at the temperatures at about 38-39 degrees.
Mhm.
So basically, you know, we do not need the compressor cooling, you know, like a clima device, climatization, if the outside temperature is below 34 degrees. It's just natural convection. It's enough. So that's why this is the efficiency of the cooling.
Mm-hmm. And I suspect because of the heat capacity of the water, that's why it's the most efficient way for you to do.
And ease of the access and cheapness and everything, you know.
Excellent.
But of course, it puts other constraints on the system per se. So now you have the water running throughout your supercomputer, you know, and just one mistake, one bad seal, you know, it's a bad news.
I would like also to ask you, I mean, everyone speaks now about the quantum computers and how, you know, the quantum computing can be a competitive to this technology that you have presented, or how quantum computing, if it's possible, can be integrated with this technology that you have presented. Especially
quantum computing is something totally different. So these supercomputers that we built with CPUs and GPU accelerated are kind of sequential computers. Okay, so you know exactly, you know, what will happen because it is coded in that way. Also, when you use the logical partition, so you have like neural network or genetic algorithms or whatever, they are all coded, okay? So they have like expected results. In quantum computing is not sequential, which means that a quantum computer can do several operations at the same time, or it cannot do the several operations at the same time, you know. So quantum computing is very useful when you have highly random processes that you would like to simulate, okay? Not for like sequential, when you have the differential equations, you know, then of course it's very straightforward, it's sequential computation, you know. If you have like probabilities and stuff like that, then you need like quantum computing. So basically you cannot integrate one with the other. Okay, but they can help each other. So if you need a very good random number generator, then you use a quantum computer. Okay.
Very, very clear.
But of course, the advancement in quantum computing in every day. So this is still, let's say, a prototype phase. And I believe that quantum computing, when we will harness its operation, you know, will be much, much more efficient than the present time computers that use way too much power, you know.
The other, you know, I have another one. Is like you presented a list that, you know, unfortunately we cannot see Greece. Probably we don't have a supercomputer, but anyhow, you have Slovenia, you know, in this ranking list. And from, you know, the criteria that I have seen, you know, of course I'm limited from my knowledge. I can see that the main factor is the flops, you know, the Rmax. Because if you can see the other numbers, you know, I could not make, you know, a sense. Some numbers, they were more in a country below you, or some other numbers, they were low in a country above you. But if you check the values of the G flops, you can see that these values increase from the top, is increased from the bottom to the up. So what are the criteria? Is this the number? With this number, I can see that Slovenia should be in this position regarding supercomputers. So what are the criteria? Because I suspect that it's a combination of the other numbers as well. So
yeah. So the measure, like a grid measure, is the maximum sustainable computing performance of the system. So this is Rmax.
Rmax, exactly.
You also have the Rpeak, which means that this is the maximum theoretical computing performance. Yeah. So if you would be computing all the cores, all the speeds and everything, you know, and if you would have the let's say light speed of communication, that would be the speed the computer would achieve. But it can never physically achieve that speed of computation. So this is Rmax. is something. And of course, depending on the processors that you have, on the number of the cores that you have available, on the efficiency of the system, you know, this Rmax can be core very efficient or less efficient. That's why the last column, which says the cores, you know, it's not really directly related to the Rmax. Like, let's say in China, they have 29 million cores of the system, but it is ranked only number 3 with the R-peak performance, which is Rmax performance, which is lower than the United States system, which has only 17 million of the cores. So there is a difference of 12 million of the cores, so almost 1/3. But this is due of the larger efficiency of the American system comparing to the Chinese. So Rmax is the number of the basic computations that you can do per second sustainably.
Yeah, correct. So I got something. And regarding the sharing, you have some very nice numbers that 60%, or if I remember well, 65% is like for national use, but there is a possibility, this national facility, to be accessed by international partners. And I have 2 questions on this. The first one is, are there any tuition fees for someone to use these facilities in order to do all these exciting measurements of these exciting experiments that you have presented? And my second question on this is like, how we can disseminate, you know, this national facility through the Athena Alliance, because this is, you know, a unique facility that, you know, I could not see the other countries to have, including my country. So the first one is, are there any tuition fees, and how, I mean, you can communicate? I think that this is a highlight that brings to our alliance that this facility is there and can be used following, of course, the process. So are there any tuition fees in order to use it?
Yeah. So the EuroHPC joint undertaking part, you know, that 35% of the system is available to all European researchers under the conditions of the EuroHPC joint undertaking. So they heavily subsidize the access, so it is very cheap or even free for some countries. So this is one way of the access. But because we are in the Athena Alliance, you know, we usually, when we have the outside partners, it's not possible to give the access to, let's say, a single researcher to use the system. You know, it's more like the semi-commercial way. But in the Athena, we could sign an agreement, you know, that we establish the institutional partnerships, you know, that we recognize that we share common goals, you know, and that would allow you to access the system in the same conditions as our researchers in Slovenia.
I mean,
we should get this also approved by our Ministry for Science and Education, because at the end they are paying the money for the operations, but I think this would not be a big deal.
Yeah, I think
this is the way forward.
Yeah, I mean, Tatiana is here. I think that by Rome, we should prepare something through Blatten to prepare, you know, an MOU to be signed between Athena and, you know, the responsible, you know, with the University of Maribor, I suspect. Like, you know, the Athena researchers to be able to have an access, and after, you know, of course, the approval of, you know, your ministry, this to be approved. I think that this should be disseminated through our Athena website when the MOU will be available, because this is a fantastic facility. It's not, it's like, you know, it's a unique facility to be disseminated through the Athena Alliance and be able to offer this, of course, following the process to the Athena partners, because the experiments that they are doing is like fantastic, like plasma experiments we are doing here. Now they are talking about production of energy using laser fusion, and they need, you know, this data process. So I think that we should do it. Can I see? There is a comment before I will give the floor to Tatiana, to Nikolaos Petrakis. Thank you for the interesting presentation, astonishing evolution in technologies taking place during the last decades. And exaflop is a measure of performance for a supercomputer that can calculate at least 1 quintillion floating.
Quintillion.
I'm a physicist. I have never heard about this unit, but I'm happy that I'm learning new things. Tatiana, the floor is yours before we close the loop.
Thank you. I need a moment to switch on the micro. I will have later on also a question. The first question that I had on the list you already asked about these possibilities, about the different participation and so on. Actually, Kostas, inside the WP4, we discussed already the opportunities that are given through this inside the University of Maribor. We already shortly presented some of the things, and we will go further with that and take into account also your support proposal to go even the step further. And yeah, already since January in the week before, we are planning the meeting with Professor Ren, but the schedule is on our side quite tight, I believe on his as well. So we didn't manage to approach to him to propose the meeting, but because we are in front of the holidays, Professor Ren, after the holidays, we will contact you with Jože. We would like to meet really already since January. This is just as a comment. And upgrade of the question that actually Kostas was asking, and you already answered. It is this, or have been already the chance, or was this also giving some results in further cooperation between the researchers or the institutions inside the University of Maribor with those who are using the capacities of VEGA, new projects or something like that? Or this statistic, I mean, it's hard to follow that statistic, but if you know, because probably those who are coming are known, and it's probably a good choice or chance to further cooperations.
Thank you very much.
I'm not really sure about your question. Probably you were asking if the researchers from the University of Maribor are using this system.
No.
No.
If those who are coming from abroad and the researchers from Maribor, because they are using the same capacities, are already in the contact to go together for some further research, or this way, how much VEGA already give the synergies to common cooperation for further activities? Because I see it also as a field where the people who are working on the research, where such computers are needed, would be able to come together and start new activities.
Most probably, but I cannot tell for sure, because we are not tracking or asking people, you know, if they have established any cooperation. What we can see is from the application of the new projects, you know, that there are collaborations with many different institutions that are involved in some projects, you know, so this is of course always positive. But I also know that when we are now applying for the Horizon Europe project, you know, every researcher in Slovenia can state the supercomputer VEGA or Meister as their own, because it's a public facility. So you can state the system, you know, like you operate it by yourself, because for the public research, you have free access and you can freely use it, this infrastructure. So definitely, there is always an opportunity. We have established a good international collaboration in terms of developing of the HPC manpower, because probably you know that in EuroJoint Undertaking, we were quite successful with the application to set up a national supercomputer competence center, which runs the workshops, you know, educating people in using the supercomputer systems. So we are always at that level. We are always in the international collaboration. But for the researchers by themselves, I cannot speak. I can speak for my group, you know, because we are heavily internationally involved. Because I do a development of the new metamaterials, where we test the concepts usually in the virtual world. And I specialized in high or extreme rate phenomena, so at very high speeds, which is always very difficult to even measure in nature. So we always use the supercomputing power to do the inverse engineering of the test that we are doing. So something similar like the particle physics, but not on this physical scale, you know.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tatiana, for the question, and Professor Ren, Zoran, for the answers. I think that we should close the loop here. I would like to thank again, Professor Ren, for this very nice opportunity to present us some, like unique facilities that they exist within the Athena, and I think that we should disseminate this heavier about this facility to all of our community, because it's a capacity of the Alliance that probably other alliances they don't have. So I would like to thank you for this very nice talk. I'm going to upload the video to the YouTube channel that only users that they have been registered to the Athena talks, they can have an access. And thank you again, Zoran, for this opportunity. Yes, Zoran, you have a question to me?
Yeah, another question, just a comment.
Yes,
I have already established a very good collaboration with the University of Siegen. I already had a presentation for their people because they would like to build something similar like us. And I'm already collaborating with some professors from the Siegen that we are trying, to join our forces, not just using the supercomputers, but also do a combined research on the European level. So there is always opportunities, and I would be very happy, to widen this collaboration to all our member universities.
Excellent. The know-how transfer, I think that is very important, and the collaboration is very important. We should highlight this, and also this collaboration also should be highlighted through our website, because this is a research collaboration that others, they exist. I can see here, my colleague Manolis, Professor Marabellakis is working with University of Orleans in cultural heritage, technologies. So I think that this kind of cells, they should be highlighted and they should be disseminated quite heavily through the Alliance. Thank you, all of you. Take care. Happy Easter. To our colleagues, from Slovenia and other Catholic countries. In Greece, we should wait for a week more, but we're going to have 1 week more for vacations. So thank you and stay safe. Bye.
You too.
Happy
Bye-bye.
Easter.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Happy Easter.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.